Good afternoon. My clock here says 2 p.m. Eastern Time, so we will go ahead and get started today as some more folks continue to join us. Welcome to iNACOL's December Leadership Webinar. My name is Natalie Abel, and I will be helping to facilitate today's webinar. So I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to all of you for joining us today and to our presenters for sharing their time and expertise with us. We're really excited to learn from everyone today. So before we get started, I have just a few housekeeping items to run through quickly. On the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, if you haven't done so already, please introduce yourself. We'd really love to connect with you, learn who you are, where you're tuning in from, what school you work with, and what you're hoping to learn today. And we really want this to be a two-way conversation today and really rich discussion in the chat box. So please feel free to comment on what you're hearing and learning and ask a lot of questions so that we can learn from you as well. We will be pausing throughout the webinar to address some questions from the audience, so please feel free to share those at any time, and I will help facilitate that Q&A process as we go, and we'll also save some time for Q&A at the end. So be sure to ask those questions and we'll get them answered for you. We also encourage you to share what you're learning on Twitter, so we can drop some Twitter hashtags and handles in the chat room for you so that you can extend your learning to your peers and networks there as well. And today's webinar will be recorded and archived on our website, so we will send you an email within the next couple days that'll have a link to the full webinar recording today, and we'll send you a link to download the slides as well. So you'll be able to refer back to any conversations that you may have missed or share any of this information with your colleagues or peers. Lastly, before I turn it over to our presenters, if you do have or experience any audio issues today, please flag that for me in the chat box, and I can try to work through some of those technical issues with you to optimize your learning experience here with us today. So with that, I am grateful to now turn it over to Laura from Kettle Moraine School District and Lisa to explore how to empower leaders and teachers in scaling personalized learning. So Laura, I will now turn it over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Glad to be with you today and working alongside of you. One of the unique features of both myself and of Lisa is that we're both leaders and both teachers, and so we feel like when we think about the context of empowering teachers and leaders, we kind of straddle both of those roles on a daily basis, which keeps us close to the work and close to the students, but also gives us the opportunity sometimes to step back and look at like a 30,000-foot view of some of the work that's going on in our district as well. So it's great to see so many of you. I see some familiar names in the chat box of folks that I've met at iNACOL conferences or amongst professional circles. So it's great to see so many people here today. So like I mentioned, I'm Laura Dom. I am the director of a K-5 elementary school in Wales, Wisconsin. And with me today, I have Lisa Welch.
Hi, I'm a K-1 teacher at Cameron Explore, and I am really invested in making sure that kids get what they need, when they need it, and really working on the personalized learning piece. I'm also a coach for the district on personalized learning.
And we'll talk a little bit more about how we balance both of those roles as we go on. So as we mentioned, we are in the Kettle Moraine School District, which is a suburb of the Milwaukee area in Wisconsin. We have 10 schools ranging from elementary, middle, and high school, but we only have 6 buildings. And how that works is that we have multiple like micro academy or micro school models within the existing building structures that we have across our district, which has helped us to start some of our innovation in a small way to be able to look at promising practices that we can scale out across the district. So we're sort of in between Madison and Milwaukee, so we get a benefit from looking at lenses in both of those areas, and we're quite close to the Institute for Personalized Learning, if anyone's familiar with that. It's right down the road from us, about 5 or 6 miles away through the CISA 1 building. So at our school, we have about 150 students in grades K through 5. So admittedly, we are a pretty small school, and we coexist in a building that shares one of our community schools. And like I mentioned, that model is pretty common across our district, where we have multiple pathways or multiple opportunities for families underneath the same roof. Each of our classes are multi-age and team taught. So as Lisa mentioned, she's a K-1 teacher. She team teaches that with another teacher, and they have those kindergarten and first grade learners in their classroom together all day throughout the year. So we look underneath that umbrella of personalized learning. It's much more about the goals that a student needs or wants to work on, meeting them at their pace and with their voice and choice, more than it is about what grade level their name says behind their name.
And one of the pillars in our school that we find really important is generative curriculum. And what we do is we don't have a set curriculum. However, we can take bits and pieces from different curriculums according to what our learners need. And much of what is generated by our learners is what we navigate through in the classroom and promote, because as we all know, their interests then are at the heart of that. Our school was established in 2013 by a group of like-minded colleagues. So the adopters for our school were really the ones who wrote the grant, and that is how KM Explore came to be.
So when we talk about kind of leaders and leadership lessons, one of the things that we know was able to help develop that success early on was that we had a group of early adopters. And now that we're about 5, 6, 7, getting into more and more school years of time, that our first kind of cohort of students in our pilot year now has gone through all of their elementary experience in this multi-age generative kind of format, we know that across our district we're working in lots of pockets to help people get along the way who maybe weren't early adopters. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how we've used sort of that Petri dish, like looking in a small environment first and then being able to scale that practice out, because we were able to do that quickly and efficiently because we had like-minded people at the onset, and then we were able to sort of be the pioneers for some of the work that's trailed after us since 2013 in our district. So when we look sort of at how we empower teachers and leaders, we're going to talk about 3 main kind of buckets around that. So the first is some practices that we've put in place that we feel like have been really successful and been promising for scaling personalized learning across not just classrooms, but across systems, which of course comes with challenges that we work to address in big ways and small ways. And then once addressing those challenges, how do we take what's working and really scale it? Because here in Kettle Moraine, we talk a lot about personalized learning is for all students, not just some students. And so when we say that, how do we sort of put our feet to the fire and make that happen across all of our learners from 4K through 12th grade?
So we're going to talk a little bit about personalizing the teacher's learning. And one of the things that we do in our district that's really gaining momentum and has really seen positive results is micro-credentialing. And we do different types of micro-credentialing. And what it is, it's really empowering teachers to decide on what their learning goals are and what they want to pursue and dig deeper into. Teachers are able to create a micro-credential. They're able to participate in a micro-credential, And that is something that furthers our learning, but it's also tied to our pay increases. So it gives teachers two incentives. One is to really grow in the area that they feel the need, and the second is the benefit of the pay increase. So right now we're running various micro-credentials. They run the gamut from special ed, we have a personalized learning, we do such micro-credentialing as closed reading skills, and it's really helping teachers understand and push themselves further in the fact that when they do a micro-credential, they show their progress. So any micro-credential that a teacher undertakes is also shown in the classroom by either a video of how the kids are benefiting and how it's tied to their learning, or pieces of evidence that reflect that as well.
So many schools and districts are taking on elements of micro-credentialing, and there's been, even at the past INACOL conference, was a handful of sessions on micro-credentialing. In KM, we've really kind of looked within more so than we've looked outside, and certainly teachers are able to take micro-credentials that are offered through Digital Promise or some other organizations, but I would say a vast majority of probably 85% or upwards of our micro-credentials are collaboration amongst our own staff and our own teachers. And so like Lisa said, it's sort of building that intrinsic motivation and urge for teachers to follow something that they feel passionate about, or that they feel they maybe have a gap of understanding, or sort of a professional goal for themselves. And the power within that is the collaboration, because almost none of our micro-credentials are done in isolation. Teachers will get together, they'll write a proposal for it, they'll meet with each other along the way to kind of say, here's some evidence I gathered from my 7th grade math class, here's some evidence I gathered from my K1 literacy block about, for example, goal setting and feedback. And so as Lisa mentioned, part of the power in this is that it's not an old model in Wisconsin for licensure used to be that you had to take graduate credit, and then your credit would eventually accumulate into earning your next license. So you had to get so many credits over so many years, which really was more about the consumption of knowledge and just sitting in class and earning the credit rather than application of that into your classroom. And so all of our micro-credentials in KM require teachers to be able to show how they have it in practice in their classroom. As Lisa said, through videos, through work samples of students, through reflection, that shows not just I took this on and I learned it, but I learned it and applied it, and this is how it's changing practice.
Yeah, so one of the questions that just came up is who evaluates the evidence of the micro-credentials, and I'm happy to say that that's also something that our teachers are now able to do. So we've been trained in looking at the micro-credential pieces and then being able to look at that. So it's not just administration, it's teachers who are looking at that, and teachers who are collaborating with teachers to grow more. It's a peer evaluation piece. So that's an answer to that question.
We also run a handful of unconferences or like EdCamp opportunities for teachers. Sometimes they are on the weekends. Sometimes they are they occur on our professional development days that are already scheduled into our calendar for the school year, where we might say, kind of outline, like, under the umbrella of personalized learning, let's pitch some session ideas that people want to learn about. So that might be, how do you give students voice and choice? How do you open up opportunities for students to set their own pace in math class? How do you give feedback to students using some of the digital tools that we use? So it allows teachers to propose a topic or a question, and then the other peers around them to kind of pull heads together, share ideas, knowledge sharing, evidence sharing in a way that really hones in on what our district vision is while still allowing teachers to kind of drive what their day of professional learning looks like.
Quick question to answer, where is the evidence gathered? We have a template that the district uses, and everything can be linked into that template. Videos, documents, and everything's in one spot then.
And then at the administrative level, we sort of look, another question in that, as Lisa mentioned, is that it's tied to base salary. So for example, if you earn, let's say a $1,000 micro-credential, that would go on your base salary, and then your next year's, or whenever you finish up the micro-credential, or kind of there's like a spring and a fall window, that goes on your base salary, and then moving forward, that's your new base salary. So if you do another micro-credential the following year, that just keeps adding on to your base salary. So teachers still get a cost of living raise every year as determined by our union and other pieces in the state, but that's another way outside of that step and lane chart, another way for teachers to advance themselves professionally.
So one of the things we've created is a look for document, and it's a continuum of personalized learning per se. So what we did was a group of educators got together last year, and I would say 2 years ago, and we really thought about what does it look like in a personalized learning classroom. And we really focused on learner disposition, we focused on pace and path and place. We took a look at all those different areas, and we wanted to show teachers how would that look like in a curriculum-centered environment versus a teacher-driven environment. And then we go to learner-centered and learner-driven. Our goal is to see learners drive their own progress. So as you go from right to left on our continuum, it's a little different than left to right, but we go from right to left, from curriculum-centered to learner-driven. It has bullets on how that would look in our classrooms. So it's been really a nice document. One of our micro-credentials is actually all about our moving along the personalized learning continuum. And one of the things that we found last year that really spoke to us was the fact that learner disposition seemed to be at the center of everything. And so in the next slide, or the slide that you will have, there is a link, and you'll see learner disposition at the top of our look for document. And it's really because we feel everything starts there with the learner. And if we can have a learner disposition, if we can have a child who's ready, who knows they can do it, who's showing tenacity and grit, then we've got something. And the rest of the pieces start falling into place. So that's a little bit about our look for document that has been created in our district.
So I just put that in the chat, the link to that live document. This is just a screenshot of one of the pages. As Lisa said, we looked at learner disposition, path, pace, voice, choice. And so this is just a snapshot of one to give you a feel for really what we wanted to do is empower teachers. When we say we have an initiative for personalized learning, you have a group of teachers almost certainly in your own systems that are ready to say, okay, I got this, I need some resources, let me jump off. And then you probably have a group of teachers who are thinking more like, I don't quite see it. Like, I don't know how to make steps to transition my classroom into being a more personalized learning environment. And then you might have people who are pretty reluctant or decidedly not going to do that. And this document really helped us have teachers self-evaluate under each of those components, because you might be very learner-driven, let's say in voice or choice, but you may be very teacher-driven in path, for example. So these bullet points help teachers kind of say, do a self-evaluation of like, what does my classroom really look like and where am I falling in this continuum? And then there's actionable steps from moving from one level, as Lisa said, to moving one more column over to the left, so that it's not just this ambiguous, here you go personalize your classroom, and then people say, I don't even know what that means or what that looks like. Oftentimes with teachers across the district, as we've been scaling some of this work, we'll have them just pick one area. So it might be learner disposition, and they kind of do a self-evaluation. They look at where they're at. They look at some actionable places that they could go to move to the next column, and then they spend time working through that and getting some coaching support with that or peer feedback. We had started an initiative last year called #ObserveMe, that we had teachers sort of post their personalized learning goal across the district, and it showed up in various ways at different schools, but post their personalized learning goal on their door outside their classroom, and then we're asking for feedback from peers. So for example, I could go into Lisa's classroom, see some practice that she's doing, and I could tweet about it using the #ObserveMe. Which would sort of kind of build that collegial network culture on Twitter, but also giving Lisa some feedback about, hey, I noticed that you were really working on path, and this is what I noticed. And even just typing one of those bullet points into a tweet, like I noticed learners and teachers co-created their profile, like shoot it off. So it felt like a good place that we could take. It was one of the sort of practices that Lisa said a team of people developed and have continue to reiterate as we learn more and get smarter and learn from others to kind of fine-tune this. But it's a great document that we use across the district.
And I think one more thing to add about it is when you look at it, it does not matter where you are on the continuum. The goal is to grow. And I think teachers see that as a friendly way of saying, you know, I've got this. I can move one step over, and I'm feeling successful. So it's a really nice document for everybody to have as a self-reflection and also as a peer-to-peer reflective piece.
So the other piece I mentioned is that we have many schools across our district, and I say many, and then I look at other bigger, much larger systems, and we have very small amount of schools compared to many systems. But one thing that we have found really important in Kettle Moraine is that we have one vision. So we have elementary schools all across, geographically across our district. We have multiple micro school or flex academy models at our high school. We have one vision, which is learning without boundaries. And part of what we've been okay with and embraced at the leadership level is that every school is going to have differences in rollout depending on their parent culture, depending on teacher readiness, depending on leadership. And knowing, as Lisa said, we can use that document for administrators too to look at where am I as a leader of teachers, and how am I providing these opportunities for my teachers, just like we want teachers to look at that through the lens of their students. So embracing the differences in rollout, knowing that it's probably not going to be super effective to just say, okay, by the start of the next school year, every single classroom is going to be personalized, ready, go, and not have some steps in failing forward and learning from that. But it's been crucial to have one vision that we talk about to the school board, to parent communities, to stakeholders, to internal conversations, that our vision as a district is moving forward. And it's going to look different in different pockets and with different grade levels, but that personalized look for document is sort of the backbone of what we say our vision is, to get to that learner-driven.
So we're going to talk a little bit about our learning communities. We find that our teacher teams are so important that we can see with 2 sets of eyes instead of one. It's a multi-age approach, so we're able to really talk about the development of the kids. And the multi-age helps with that because, as we all know, kids develop so differently. It gives our school a feeling of community, and by that I mean when we have our learning communities together, our K-1, our 2-3, and our 4-5, it's a big happy family. We're just a big community. We have a lot of kids who know each other from previous years. We have siblings in different areas. And as Laura said, our school is small enough that we're able to get together and get to see each other, which really helps that community feel and that identity of who we are.
So a great example of how we've scaled that, as I mentioned, we recognize that we are a small school of about 150 students, and we're the smallest of our elementary schools across the district, but we knew that feeling of a learning community was powerful. We saw the power in just knowing our families over time, of having a tight-knit group of teachers looking at students, even if the classes weren't taught necessarily in a multi-age, having some opportunities for vertical alignment, so that students just didn't get kind of tossed into a name barrel and then pulled out and replaced into the next year's teacher team or next year's class, but that there was some continuity over time. And so we looked at one of our other elementary schools, who is a bit larger than us, of trying to figure out how they could make a learning community model when they had maybe 5 or 6 sections of a grade level. And so they titled it the neighborhood, and they kind of made a vertical team of like K1-2 and another vertical team of K1-2, and kind of kept kids on one of those strands so that they could look at data over time. They could have conversations as teachers about students over multiple years. They built that sense, like Lisa said, that family feel or kind of community feel, so that it wasn't just every one of you is a second grader, but they kind of made like a team name or a home base name for where they were. And that just helped a lot with, gave us opportunities to build in looping for some of our elementary teachers to kind of stay with students over time, built in pretty strong communication tools with parents because they knew a predictable newsletter or information through Seesaw because they had known the teachers over multiple years. So it was one way that we kind of took something that was working really well in a small school, and we took a bigger school and tried to kind of make small community feelings across the building so that students felt a sense of like ownership and identity with that. Okay, before we get to the next section, Natalie, were there any questions that we didn't answer?
Thank you. You guys did a really good job of answering questions. There were just a couple other quick ones that if you want to take a crack at addressing those. When we jump back to the micro-credentials section, Erica Baker asked if there was a rubric that your teachers use whenever they're evaluating one another's evidence to earn those micro-credentials. So if you could speak on whether there's a rubric or some other way that teachers can evaluate those micro-credentials.
There actually is a rubric. We have a rubric that we use to look at for all those different pieces of is the learner at the center of this? Are they benefiting from this? So yes, we do have a rubric that helps keep everything, so we can look at everything in a fair way.
There's also 3 tiers of levels of monetary value attached to micro-credentials, so like a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3. And again, it's a little bit admittedly arbitrary at the beginning as we were first rolling out micro-credentials about 3 or 4 years ago, of like what constitutes a, let's just say for example, a $300 micro-credential versus a $1,000 micro-credential. And the team has really wrestled with that. There's obviously like a reality part about there's a budgetary limit to how much money we can award with micro-credentials over the year. And so our assistant superintendent would be the first to say, no, none of the micro-credentials that have been submitted have ever been a no, but they might be suggestions or feedback from the viewing team to say, not yet. So how can you change it so that, like Lisa said, if it's not having students at the center, or if it's not, if it's just teacher knowledge, but like teacher gaining knowledge about something, but it's not impacting student performance or a daily student interaction with students, it might be Not yet, because how can we mold this idea that you have into how it's going to impact student change? And some of that is we've had the different tiers are sort of loosely based on what the impact that's going to have on an entire school day. So for example, if a math teacher at the high school or middle school was doing a micro-credential about critical thinking and problem solving in a math workshop, that's going to impact his or her entire day of every class of math that he or she has, versus if maybe an art teacher did a close reading strategy micro-credential, may not be as impactful on the scope of their entire teaching day as it would be if a reading teacher did that. So just a little bit thinking through like things that might be quality ideas, and how do we as peers sort of give some collegial feedback to others about how they can increase it to really maximize, hit some of those pieces of the personalized learning look for document, or maximize its impact on student learning.
Great, thank you. And we had a somewhat related question from Dr. Kevin in Colorado, more of a systems level question. He's asking, do you track the teacher credentials for each educator at the district level, or how do you handle that?
Yes, so they're all funneled through. As I mentioned, we have 3 windows. There's like a fall window, a spring window, and then a summer window that teachers can propose their micro, collect their evidence, and then submit kind of their final reflection. And we really don't have, like, it could take you a year to do that if you need more time for that. Our high school is run on a block schedule, so they can, in some cases, they may be able to implement their micro within their 9-week course that they have and be able to collect evidence on it, whereas an elementary teacher might, in order to collect the evidence that they kind of set out to do, might take, they might need to wait until April or May as they finalize some pieces in their class. So it's less about the amount of time it takes, but more of like windows of where you can propose your micro-credential, and those are all kind of housed or kind of run through our district office. And as Lisa said, we have teams of teachers that review micro-credentials. So if I write a micro-credential as a 4th grade teacher, I might have Lisa as another elementary teacher kind of combing through that and looking at it, and I might also have a high school biology teacher looking at that. So it really is a cross-pollination of ideas, and often our micro-credentials are seen or kind of known by someone else, and then they think like, hey, can I jump on? And I could take that same idea and kind of twist it and make it work for me at the middle school, and it kind of just grows that way. But yes, our district office is the one that sort of kind of organizes and combs through all the data on that. As administrators, we get feedback probably about twice a year of how many teachers we have across our system that have engaged in micro-credentials, just to kind of keep a pulse on if somebody hasn't done one ever. That's a great opportunity for me as a leader to have a conversation with them. Like, do you understand the process? Like, is it a question about, I don't know how to submit, or I don't know how to do it, I don't know what to write, I don't have an idea to pursue, or is it just a disinterest in doing that, which is a whole nother conversation. But it's great data for us to see. Like, I know the micros that my team is working on, but it's great to see what other teachers from other schools are working on as well.
Great, thank you. And just another quick follow-up. Is your district using a specific software or tool to track those micro-credentials? Jason in the chat box mentioned Badger or Bloomboard. So if you have any insights on tools that work for you guys, I'm sure the attendees here would love to hear about it.
I wish we had a good answer for that. We started using Google Docs, and I do not recommend that. I was actually just introduced to Bloomboard at the INACOL conference a couple months ago, and it seems like a really, really swift platform for kind of organizing that. Partly, I think, because we didn't know how popular and how big it was going to be amongst our teachers. which eventually turned into a nightmare mess of like sharing documents and spreadsheets and things like that. So we are kind of right now in the business of actually looking for a platform that can support it so that it's not folders and folders and folders in Team Drive and Google Drive and that sort of thing. So we probably should have done that first, but kind of missed either maybe they weren't quite, the tools weren't quite ready when we were looking, or we just didn't find a connection that fit. And now we're sort of wishing we had.
Great. Yeah, and if anybody attending today's webinar has any recommendations on tools and platforms they use to track micro-credentials, feel free to share your own experiences and tools that you recommend in the chat box. But I will turn it back over to the presenters for now, and we will address any other questions that come in a little bit later.
So as we look at how we sort of address some challenges, as I mentioned, Lisa and I feel very fortunate because from the onset, our team was early adopters, big believers, ready to jump in, always kind of looking for the next step, how could we keep doing this better, smarter, more efficiently. And we know that we work alongside and with other people in our building, in our district, that are on all different levels of adoption of personalized learning. So just a quick activity that we've done with teams across the district, but just a sort of a framework or a catchphrase that we continue to use is really addressing the barriers and then building bridges to get over them. So really empowering teachers. Oftentimes when you ask teachers, what are the barriers to their work or the barriers to personalizing learning, 90% of them tend to be adult problems. Like, how do I organize and manage that? How do I track where the students are going? How do I set up my classroom in such a way? How do I release control and kind of give away some choice for students? And we actually ask teachers with all of the barriers that they outline, we ask them to sort of build a bridge or make a connection or a step that they can make off of that barrier so that they're not just admiring a problem, but seeking a solution. And so that phrase, kind of barriers to bridges, is something that's pretty common amongst our buildings about when we come to barriers in personalized learning, which we will. Sometimes they come in the form of, as we just mentioned, not having a tool, a technology tool to support the work we're doing or trying to do, timing, time to collaborate, the kind of fear of releasing control to students and what if they don't do what they need to do with that or they don't complete work in a timely manner. And we really kind of turn that back with support to teachers about building bridges to kind of help pull pieces of that. And that look for document really helps with that because they can take one little bridge at a time that they work to building understanding of, and across that continuum can kind of move in a relatively linear way of, okay, now you got this, now how can we support you to add one more piece to that?
So one of the things that we do is we can go into classrooms in the district and really help with that non-evaluative coaching, maybe looking at the look for document, possibly just sitting down and talking and saying, how are things going with you? And really kind of weeding out how things are going and what might be a next step or a step on that, to that bridge. So it's nice because it's non-evaluative, it's done by teachers. So as I said, we have a group of teachers who are coaches in our district, and they've taken on the leadership role in many different areas, in language arts, in social studies, in science, in personalized learning. And we go into the different schools with different teachers and just have that talking session, that coaching session, which is really nice.
And I would say the difference with that, too, because we do still have a literacy coach, a reading coach, the difference with what Lisa was talking about is that all of our personalized learning coaches are also classroom teachers. So they are going back to their classroom the next morning at 8 o'clock, or they're heading from the meeting to go to their classroom. So they're very much on the ground floor. They can offer suggestions, but it's not in a way that's like a hierarchy type of difference in that, because oftentimes, and Lisa would be the first to say, like, as coaches, we get some of the best ideas that we have from conversations with other people who are asking us to coach them, because it just kind of opens your mind to some new ideas. So Lisa is one of about a dozen lead teachers across the district, which means that they have what we call a lab classroom, kind of a doors always open policy of being able to allow anyone in, and some of the best conversations actually are when a high school teacher comes and sits in on a kindergarten and first grade classroom and looks at elements of personalized learning in a way that's completely foreign to them, as far as age group and content and so forth. But that coaching model has been really helpful. There's a lot of times where I might cover an hour of Lisa's day so she could pop across the district to another class to talk with another teacher she's been working with, or we have common planning time once a week, and there's been times where consecutively Lisa has been meeting with another team of teachers somewhere in the district that kind of, they sort of have that coaching relationship, but it's also heavily based in Lisa's own experience with her own class and her own students.
And one of the things that we're going to try, we haven't yet, so I'm not able to tell you how it's going yet, but we'd like to create a menu for our teachers. So if they're looking at improving in different areas, we would create a menu. Let's just say it's on personalized learning. If teachers want to know more about learner disposition, that coaching piece can come from their need to want to know more strategies on how to help the learner feel more empowered. Maybe they want some coaching on pace. How can we get kids moving at a different pace when they're going in different directions? More often than not, that's confusing for teachers. So that might be a way to go in and coach, and it's really organically created from the teacher, and we bounce off of it from there. So that's what we're in the process of right now.
So one of the other key components always is making sure that your stakeholders are involved. I would say one of the biggest lessons we learned early on is that our students can be our biggest voice, and we need to let them be that. So often we work on making sure that, oh, we have to tell and get all the information to parents, but really it speaks to so much louder, and if their student is happy, their student can talk about what they're doing at school. They're excited to come to school every day. They're eager to learn. And so we have used Seesaw, which is a online logfolio, for lack of a better word, program that we use. It actually started in Lisa's class in K-1, and it had such success from parents that we've scaled it for K-5. And we have seen just great success. It offers a really child-friendly interface to take pictures, videos, upload things that students are working on that a parent can see from an app on their phone, so they can be very in tune with what's going on throughout the day. But the students are the ones who are really driving that. And as teachers, we of course can post announcements and things like that, but it really does, it's, you know, a giant portfolio of all the things that a kid has done, and our parents have absolutely loved that. It tells a story so much more than just taking a, you know, like the penguin construction paper artwork home to put on the fridge. It's much more deep than that, of kids talking about the goals that they're working on, kids showing evidence of like reading a book and showing how they met a goal that was set out, you know, co-created with their teacher. And that's been instrumental in getting our parents to really see what kids are doing in the classroom when they're not in the classroom for the majority of the time, and getting that in their hands.
And I think the power in it is twofold, because as Laura said, the parents see it in real time. So it's almost like a rapid cycle feedback loop for that child, because the teacher can comment and the parent can comment in real time once they see it. It's kind of a nice, it empowers the learner to keep going at it and to keep wanting to share what they're doing. So that's a nice piece of Seesaw.
And just another piece that we've done that might be different from the norm is book studies. Over the past couple of years, we've run various book studies with parents, everything from Milton Chen's Education Nation to last year we did Integrating and the Habits of Mind framework from Arthur Costa. And so it's a very non-threatening. We usually do it in like February because it's awful in Wisconsin in February. Nobody wants to do anything or go out, or it gets dark really early. It's cold and miserable outside. So it usually is a 3 or 4 session book study. We purchase the books and put them in our district library, professional libraries, and then check them out to a parent, or actually their student, but their parent reads it. And so it's a great way. It builds up our own collection of books, but it also gives them an opportunity to read the book for free if they want, or some of them choose to purchase it. But we've had different levels of success with engaging parents in some of these conversations about this work in a more unique way than just handing out paperwork or sending home information. So we kind of touched on this, but just the ways that we've kept momentum, as Lisa mentioned, the coaching teams have been really successful in kind of having that touch person or touch point to come into your classroom and come into team meetings. That's not a principal or not someone that's evaluating you, but continuing to support you along the journey and kind of helping with that. And then that leadership structure of the lead teachers and coaches, personalized learning coaches, all within buildings that already are existing in their own classrooms, so it's kind of keeping that support at a very ground level. All right, are there any questions about addressing challenges?
I haven't seen any further questions come in, so if anybody has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll just turn it right back over to you.
Okay. So we've sprinkled in some of the ways that we've scaled, but just to kind of hone in a little bit tighter on ways that we've taken pieces of what's worked in our environment here at KM Explore and look to scale it across the district. One of the ways that has really caught on is the idea of rapid cycle planning. And so this actually came sort of through the direction of our superintendent a couple of years ago about sometimes thinking about districts can be really strong at building like a 5-year strategic vision or 5-year plan, which makes it feel very hard to decipher, like, what are you going to do in September and October to work on this 5-year plan? It feels too big and it feels too far away, and it's almost like let's wake up at the end of the 4th year and say like, oh yeah, we said we were going to do X, Y, or Z, and it's surprising we didn't get it done. Okay, let's think about our next 5-year strategic plan. So we've really looked at kind of flipping that model to really be a rapid cycle model. And so we look with teams across the district at building what we call 100-day action plans. And really the 100-day part is arbitrary. It could be 92 days or it could be 110 days. It's really just more of, typically in about 3 months, what are action steps that we are going to work on. It's in a finite amount of time. It allows us to be nimble because we're not planning for the whole year, we're just planning for 100 days. And if you think back to that look for document, sometimes those bullet points are exact things that we say, let's take this bullet point and how do we break this into some action steps that we're going to put in place in our classroom over the next 100 days. And then a coach like Lisa or myself might pop into team meetings, kind of look at that action plan. How are we doing on this? Are we on track to meet this goal? And then after that 100 days, then we kind of get together, put our brains together, and then build the next 100-day plan. So in a school year, we hit about 3 100-day plans. The last one usually trickles into more of the summer days. So even though obviously a calendar year has more than 300 days, but looking at steps that go into the summer to have teachers kind of work on things. So this has allowed us to be to continually think about improvement and innovation in a way that doesn't seem like, oh no, I have to arrive as a personalized learning teacher, but more of how can you look in just the next 3 months, what are things you can put into reading workshop and math workshop that can help you turn your class into a more learner-driven place.
So some of the, we talk about looking at what's working in our district and really expanding on it. And we let the kids sort of lead that in a way, and I'll explain what I mean by that. So we do a lot of modeling. We have our classrooms where teachers will come in, and teachers will observe, but we'll let the kids tell the story of the classroom. We'll let the kids show by example. And it's their modeling that the teachers really take back, the modeling that the students do, so that they can do it in their own classroom. It's that peer-to-peer teaching again, so when teachers have questions, of course we're going to answer them, and of course we're going to, they push our thinking when they come in to observe, and we push their thinking, so it's a reciprocal thing, but we really let the kids kind of drive that. So when teachers come to observe, they walk around, they talk to the kids, the power comes from the kids of what they're saying and why they're doing what they're doing. And that's how we're trying to grow this throughout our district.
And it becomes so much more powerful when, let's say, a first grade student, you know, a 6-year-old can sit down and really say, here are the goals I'm working on, here's how I'm showing that I'm meeting them, here's what evidence I have in Seesaw. Like, they're using words and phrases like this, which helps another teacher who might be another first grade teacher across the district and maybe more reluctant to start personalized learning to say, like, okay, it's not just the teacher telling me that this is how I need to do it, but this is through the eyes of a learner, being able to see elements of what I can do when I look at my own students. As I mentioned, we have this sort of micro school or flex academy model across the district, and the intent of all of those sort of start small, grow big, has been to teach with the doors open, teach with an intent to share practices. It's never been a just go out to a barn in the woods and teach this way and hope that other people find the secret. It's much more about how do we start in a way where we have early adopters and find some really quick wins and good success, and how do we keep growing that. And so one of the ways that's been really helpful is that we have a lot of teachers across our personalized learning, I would say more in-depth personalized learning environments that maybe straddle 2 schools or teach part of their day in one environment and part of the day in the other, which is an awesome way for some of that practice to sort of bleed over into kind of helping what we call our legacy, which is our more traditional schools as they grow in their understanding and implementation of personalized learning. And finally, hopefully what you've also gleaned from our conversation today is the power of teacher leaders. So we have directors of learning, we have directors of schools, we have lead teachers, we have coaches all across the district who share part of the role of their day as maybe administrative and part of the role of their day as teacher, or part of their day as coach and part of their day as teacher, because we don't just want to take our best teachers, build them up, and then take them out of the classroom and make them into a supporting role or an admin role and take away the gift that they have in front of students. So we've really looked at flipping that model to empower and give a lot of choice and a lot of growth opportunity in career pathways for our teachers, our best teachers, and keeping them there in the classroom as lab classes or coaches or in lead teacher positions.
So finally, in our district, we have the expectation to innovate. It's something that we're very passionate about, and instead of asking permission, this is something that we expect. We expect our learning without boundaries, the transformation of education for all students. So
it helps with kind of switching, like Lisa said, that mindset of it's not asking permission to do it, it's building an expectation to do it. And part of that is we really believe deeply in the power of kind of grassroots or ground floor innovation with top-down support. So our district office staff is not dictating and telling Lisa how she should personalize learning for kindergarten and first graders in her classroom, but they're giving her a ton of support, a ton of opportunity to fail forward, and a ton of space to learn as she's expected to sort of innovate. So that's been a subtle shift for us, I think, but it's an important one because it is an expectation across the district, which feels very different than asking for permission to try something new or to innovate. And with that, we're kind of at the end. Are there any other questions, Natalie, from the last section or the one before that?
We haven't had any further questions, so we do have about 4 minutes left. So if folks who are attending have any last-minute questions, feel free to add them to the chat box now. We might have time to address a couple for you. And I do see a couple folks are typing. So while we wait, I just wanted to point out that if you haven't seen it, Competency Works, which is a project of iNACOL that focuses on advancing competency education, is doing a case study on Kettle Moraine. And they're doing really interesting things in personalized learning. So if you haven't seen that yet, definitely check it out. It's on competencyworks.org, and we can add the link in the chat box for you. And we do have a new question from Susan Davies. Do you have some resources you can use with your math classes?
Yes, I'm going to put another link in the chat box. Hopefully that came up. To a Google Doc. This is a draft in our district, so please recognize that it's a draft if there's any typos or, but addressing that exact question of what does math look like in a personalized learning environment. And so across the top of it are kind of our core math team along with some sort of outside brain power work to sort of develop, like, in a math environment, how does that match up with personalized learning? So the kind of column heads across the top looking for, and even though they're divided into thirds, it's not intended to show that they exactly have to be a third, a third, a third, but definitely an element of problem solving, an element of skill and algorithm development, and an element of concept development. So this is sort of a working doc that our teachers have been using to kind of help see what groups look like, how the learner is organized, how the teacher is organized, some ideas about frequency, though it's not meant to be tied to like the minutes or time per week, but just some ideas of how when we look at how we look at path and pace, what are some ways that we are still making sure that we're giving students time for skill and algorithm development, time for problem solving, and time for concept development. So this was just sort of, as we were working and kind of getting deeper into this, of a place that we could kind of catch our ideas a little bit about. We do use a lot of digital tools for math across elementary through high school, and just looking at the balance of using those as a practice tool, as well as balancing the role of teaching, the role of the teacher in that. And I think sometimes a misconception with people is like personalized learning is just everyone comes in and kind of does what they want to do for the day and figures out what they want to do and when they want to do it. And the teacher just kind of sits back, and actually that couldn't be further from the truth in our opinions. And so this looks at how is the teacher facilitating the class in such a way that students can be successful with the elements of personalized learning.
Great, thank you. And I think we're going to try to squeeze in these last two somewhat related questions related to teacher leaders and coaches. So one question is, do the teacher leaders or coaches who still have classroom responsibilities also get a bump in compensation? And question number two is, do you rotate the teacher leader and coaches?
Two great questions. So right now the role is pretty new, maybe 2 or 3 years that we've been kind of fully into that model. So we haven't kind of had that discussion yet about rotating in or out, although there are some realities to, like, we had one teacher who was a lead teacher who was starting a family and wanted to kind of step away from some of those roles just because she was at a different point in her life. But yes, they do get extra compensation, and actually they're on a different contract than our teachers. So here in Wisconsin, our teachers are on a 189-day contract, which is how many contract days that they're in the district, where our lead teachers are on a 210 or 211-day contract. I had to have Lisa help me with that, sorry. So they have extra days in their contract, which looks like leading some of this work over the summer, maybe meeting with teams over the summer. It can be pretty flexible, even if it's like, you know, an evening, a couple of evenings during, you know, September that they're meeting with teams or things like that. It's not really about counting the hours, but giving them that extra bump in salary, and then also more time. They come to different leadership retreats or trainings and different professional development. They're in charge of organizing and helping plan for some of our professional development and our unconferences, and that pay bump and then the change of their contract kind of helps accommodate that.
And
excellent, thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. The question also regarding we've added more teacher leaders. So the need has shown that we needed to add some. So we haven't rotated any, but we have added some teacher leaders.
Yeah, I think we started with 4 initially, and we're up to about a dozen.
Wow, that's great. Unfortunately, we are out of time for today. There are still a few questions in the chat box. For those folks who still have questions, I would encourage you to contact us at iNACOL, and we'd be happy to connect you with the presenters. Or you can contact the presenters directly via email. I'm sure they would be more than happy to answer any other questions that you might have. But sincerely, thank you to Laura and Lisa for their time and sharing their model at Kettle Moraine and all of their interesting strategies for scaling personalized learning. I personally really loved the bridges analogy that you put forth earlier. I thought that was really powerful. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, this webinar will be recorded and archived, so we'll be sending you these slides and the full recording within a couple days. So with that, I will close today's webinar. Yes, thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.